Cosa succede quando l'amore di una famiglia si trasforma in veleno puro? Quando le persone che dovrebbero proteggerti diventano i tuoi peggiori aguzzini? Ti dico subito che la storia che sto per raccontarti non è per i deboli di cuore. È la storia di come sono stata umiliata, derisa e data per spacciata dalla mia stessa madre nel giorno più importante per mio fratello. È la storia di come la vendetta, servita fredda, può essere l'unica vera giustizia. Mi chiamo Sofia, e il giorno del matrimonio di mio fratello, Marco, avrebbe dovuto essere un sogno. Invece, si è trasformato nel mio incubo personale, un incubo che mi ha ossessionato per anni. Quella mattina, il sole splendeva su Napoli, ma la mia anima era avvolta da un'ombra gelida. L'aria era densa di aspettative, di gioia, ma per me, ogni respiro era un presagio di ciò che sarebbe accaduto. Avevo visto mia madre, Carla, tessere la sua tela per mesi. Aveva sempre favorito Marco, il figlio maschio, il futuro della famiglia. Io ero solo la figlia, quella da sistemare, da mettere da parte. Ma non avrei mai immaginato fino a che punto si sarebbe spinta per dimostrarlo. Mio nonno Enzo, un uomo che aveva fatto fortuna in America, aveva volato per 6 ore, da New York a Napoli, solo per il matrimonio di Marco. Nonno Enzo era la mia roccia, il mio faro, l'unico che mi vedeva davvero. La sua presenza, in quel giorno, significava tutto per me. Ma mia madre aveva altri piani. Quando nonno Enzo è arrivato, dopo un viaggio estenuante, mia madre lo ha fatto sedere al tavolo più lontano, proprio accanto ai bidoni della spazzatura. Sì, hai capito bene, i bidoni della spazzatura del ristorante più chic di Napoli. Un affronto indicibile, un insulto che mi ha trafitto il cuore. Ho sentito il sangue ribollire nelle vene, l'umiliazione bruciare come acido. Ho provato a protestare, a chiedere spiegazioni. Mamma, cosa stai facendo? È il nonno. Le mie parole erano appena un sussurro strozzato dalla rabbia. La sua risposta è stata un silenzio glaciale, seguito da un sorriso che non prometteva nulla di buono. Poi, davanti a tutti gli invitati, davanti a nonno Enzo, mi ha afferrato il braccio. La sua mano si è alzata. E un sonoro schiaffo ha risuonato nella sala. Non un colpetto, non una spinta. Un vero schiaffo, di quelli che ti fanno vedere le stelle. Il mio viso è bruciato, non solo per il dolore fisico, ma per la vergogna, l'umiliazione. Ho sentito gli occhi di tutti su di me, i sussurri, i giudizi. Nonno Enzo ha cercato di alzarsi, ma era troppo debole, troppo scioccato. In quel momento, ho capito che non era solo un matrimonio, era una dichiarazione di guerra. Mia madre voleva annientarmi, farmi sentire inferiore, indegna. Voleva che tutti vedessero che io non contavo nulla. Il mio cuore si è indurito. Le lacrime non sono scese, bloccate da un muro di risentimento che si stava costruendo dentro di me. Ogni fibra del mio essere urlava vendetta. Non l'avrei perdonata. Non avrei dimenticato. Il matrimonio è continuato, ma per me era un blur. Ogni sorriso, ogni brindisi, ogni abbraccio era una pugnalata. Ho visto mia madre pavoneggiarsi, accogliere gli invitati come la padrona di casa perfetta, mentre io ero un'ombra, una macchia nella sua immagine immacolata. Ma c'era qualcosa che lei non sapeva. Qualcosa che nessuno sapeva, a parte me e nonno Enzo. Pochi istanti dopo quello schiaffo, mentre il mio viso ancora bruciava, un rombo sordo ha iniziato a farsi sentire nel cielo. Un suono che ha fatto vibrare i vetri del ristorante. Un suono che ha zittito tutti i presenti. Il rombo è diventato un tuono assordante, sempre più vicino. Le persone si sono affacciate alle finestre, curiose, spaventate. Mia madre, con la sua maschera di perfezione, ha aggrottato la fronte, infastidita dall'interruzione. E poi, l'impensabile. Un jet privato, enorme, lucido, ha iniziato la sua discesa, non verso l'aeroporto di Capodichino, ma verso il campo da calcio adiacente al ristorante. Un campo che era stato chiuso per anni, ora miracolosamente riaperto. Il jet ha toccato terra con una grazia inaspettata, sollevando una nuvola di polvere. Il portellone si è aperto lentamente. E da lì è sceso un uomo. Un uomo che mia madre credeva di aver cancellato dalla nostra vita. Un uomo che avrebbe cambiato tutto. Quell'uomo non era solo un invitato. Era l'inizio della mia vendetta. L'inizio di una serie di eventi che avrebbero smascherato ogni bugia, ogni inganno. Ti chiedo, cosa faresti se la persona che ami di più fosse umiliata in modo così crudele? Se la tua famiglia ti tradisse nel modo più vile? Resta con me, perché quello che è successo dopo ha superato ogni fantasia. Quello che è sceso da quell'aereo ha rivelato segreti sepolti, ha ribaltato ogni equilibrio e ha portato alla luce una verità così sconvolgente che ha fatto tremare le fondamenta della mia famiglia. Preparati, perché questa storia ti terrà incollato fino all'ultimo secondo. Te sumer it in Puglia klung to everything, a tic, inescapable blanket. Batte chili nur family villa felt far colder than any winter. Mi name is Sofia, and for as long as I could remember, that villa, with its sunbacked terracotta tiles and sprawling olive groves, had been a patch of joy. No, it was a battleground, a silent war zone where smiles were weapons and every conversation a skirmish. The air crackled with unspoken resentments, mostly directed at me, or so I felt. My brother, Marco, was getting married. This should have been a celebration, a grand festa worthy of our Italian heritage, but it had morphed into something ugly, something that gnawed at me so like a persistent, unwelcome guest. My grandfather, nonno Enzo, had flown 6 hours from his home in Sicily for this. 6 hours, at this age, a journey that vowed exhaust a younger man. A vast patriarch, the foundation of our sprawling, often shouty, family. Nonno Enzo, with his estatel the wisdom of 1,000 sunsets and a love that could fill any room, was then a person who truly saw me, truly understood the queer struggles beneath me outwardly calm demeanor. E was mi confidante, mi rock, especially since mi father passed. His presence was a balm, a rare moment of genuine comfort in a house where comfort had become a foreign concept. Then came the sitting arrangements for the pre-wedding dinner. My mother, Isabella, a woman whose body was matched only by a easy control, orchestrated everything with the precision of a general planning siege. She had a way of making Greca of small, insignificant, without uttering a single large word. Her methods were far more insidious. I watched, a knot forming in my stomach, as she pointed nonno Enzo to a small, isolated table near the kitchen entrance, practically based at the overflowing bin of discarded floral arrangements. It was a deliberate slight, a calculated humiliation. The scent of wilting roses, and stale food wafted over, a cruel irony for a man who deserved the place of honor at the head of the table. My heart hammered against my ribs. Nonno Enzo, ever the gentleman, simply not dead. A flicker of something unreadable in his ancient eyes. E vowed to make a scene. And never did. Ad was his strength, and so met his vulnerability. But he couldn't let it stand. Not nonno Enzo. He had sacrificed so much for our family, for me. He had always been the one to pick me up when he stumbled, to whisper words of encouragement when no one else bothered. He was the who taught me to find beauty in the simplest things, to appreciate the quest trait of the olive trees. Mamma, he began, my voice barely a whisper, yet it felt like a cannon shot in the tense silence of the dining room. My brother, Marco, engrossed in conversation with his fiancée, didn't even look up. Nonno Enzo showed be at the main table. He flew out his way. Isabella turned, her expression as unyielding as the marble statues in the garden. Her eyes, usually so expressive, were flat, devoid of warmth. Sofia, she sighed, her tone deceptively soft, a dangerous calm before the storm. You have everything under control. Your grandfather prefers a quieter spot. He told me so himself. A lie. A blatant, artful lie. Nonno Enzo loved being in the thick of things, surrounded by family, sharing stories. My guts darted to him. He shook his head almost imperceptibly, a silent plea for me to let it go. But he couldn't not his team. My resentment, simmering for months, suddenly boiled over. Tis was nicht just abu a table. Id was abu respect, abu love. Abu omi moter ad systematically sideline anione udare to challenge e rotoriti, or worse. Anione she perceved as a threat to her carefully constructed world. E did not. I retorted, mi voice gaining straight. Fueled be a surge of right manger. E would never say that. E camere for Marco, for family, not to be relegated to the corner like some afterthought. That was it. Ted ambroche. Isabella's composure shattered. Eyes narrowed, her lips turned into a hard line. Before he could ever register what was happening, her hand flew out. The slap echoed through the room, sharp and stinging, leaving a fire imprint on my cheek. The sound was deafening, silencing every conversation, every murmur. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. My cheek burned, but the pain in my head was far deeper. It wasn't just the physical assault. It was the public humiliation, the stark, brutal confirmation of her contempt. A collective gasp replied through the guests. Marco finally looked up, his eyes wide with shock. But he said nothing, did nothing. Nonno Enzo pushed back his chair, his face a mask of grief and fury. For a moment, he thought he would intervene, thought he would finally stand up to Isabella. But he simply looked at me, a silent apology in his guts. Before turning away, his shoulders slumped. Tears welled in my eyes, a tongue stinging, but he refused to let them fall. Not in front of her. Not in front of them. My mother, breathing heavily, her chest heaving, stared at me with an intensity that promised further retribution. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. It was then, in that moment of raw, exposed vulnerability, that a new emotion solidified within me, an unshakable resolve. This wasn't just a boo slap. This was a boo years of manipulation, of emotional abuse, of watching my mother chip away at the joy in her life, leaving only bitterness in its wake. I felt a cold, calculated calm settle over me, replacing the initial shock. My eyes met Isabella's, and for the first time, it didn't flinch. A subtle shift in power, a quiet understanding passing between us. She had drawn first blood, but this was far from over. I vowed not forget this. I vowed not forgive this. And as this, tanta mofa private jet began to grow louder. A low rumble that vibrated through the very foundation of the villa, a chilling that took root in my mind. Someone else was arriving. Someone with power. And perhaps, just perhaps, their arrival would change everything. The low rumble of the private jet grew into a thunderous roar, a sound that vibrated not just through the villa's ancient stones, but deep within my very bones. It was a sound of immense wealth, of undeniable power, and in that moment, it felt like the universe itself was announcing a shift in the suffocating dynamics of her family. My mother, Isabella, who moments before had been radiating an easy satisfaction, now wore a flicker of something akin to apprehension on her perfectly composed face. She smoothed her silk dress, her eyes darting towards the door, a rare crack in her impenetrable facade. The hotel relatives, who had been whispering behind their hands, suddenly fell silent, their collective gaze fixed on the entrance. This wasn't just another guest arriving for Marco's wedding. This was an event. A tall, impeccably dressed man, his silver hair swept back with an air of effortless sophistication, strode into the dining room. He moved with an authority that commanded instant respect, his gaze sweeping over the room, taking in every detail. Behind him, a younger woman, equally striking, followed with a quiet confidence. My breath caught in my throat. It was my father's brother, my zio Alessandro, and his daughter, my cousin, Giulia. Zio Alessandro, who had left Italy decades ago to build an empire in finance, rarely graced us with his presence. His visits were legendary, always marked by a ripple of excitement and a palpable tension. His arrival now, just as my mother had so brazenly umiliate, di nonno Enzo, felt like a scene ripped from a dramatic opera. Nonno Enzo, Stissiate dat is ignominious stable bite kitchen ad straightened is back. A spark of defiance rekindling in his tired days. E watched Alessandro with a qui intensity. A history of unspoken words passing between them. Mi motor, recovering her composure, glided towards Alessandro. Her smile a little too wide, a little too eager. Alessandro, what a surprise. We weren't expecting Greca until tomorrow. Her voice, usually a weapon, now held a hint of forced sweetness. Alessandro smile was polite, but his eyes were cold. Isabella, always the gracious hostess. My schedule shifted. I preferred to beirli. Is gazet and found nonno Enzo, and a genuine warm softened his fiatures. E walked past mi motor, past the stunned relatives, directly to nonno Enzo. E extended a hand, a gesture of respect that cut through the strained atmosphere like a knife. Nonno Enzo, it's good to see Greca. I Greca look well. Mi grandfather send, near led with age, clasped Alessandro's firmly. Alessandro. I Greca come. There was a depth of emotion in nonno Enzo's voice that he rarely heard. It was tentati noticed the small, almost imperceptible nod Alessandro gave me, a silent acknowledgement that spoke volumes. E knew. E so. Mi motor, clearly flustered by Alessandro's direct route to nonno Enzo. Tried to interject. Alessandro, we have a beautiful table prepared for Greca writer, at the head of the family table. She gestured grandly to the empty seats beside Marco, a stark contrast to nonno Enzo's lonely corner. Alessandro turned, his expression unreadable. Isabella, thank you Greca But I believe nonno Enzo has already found a table. We will join him. E then looked at Giulia. Giulia, please. Giulia, without word, pulled up to shares to nonno Enzo's small, forgotten table. The entire room collectively gasped. Mi motor's face, usually a mask of serene control, flushed a deep crimson. The audacity, the sheer disregard for her meticulously planned hierarchy, was a public slap in the face. She stood frozen, her perfectly manicured hands clenched at her sides. The other relatives exchanged furtive glances, a mixture of shock and suppressed amusement playing on their faces. He felt a surge of triumph, odd and exhilarating, coursed through me. It was a small victory, but a potent one. Mi motor's humiliation was a balm to the wound she had inflicted on nonno Enzo, and by extension, on me. Yet, a part of my duties was just a beginning. Isabella was not on to concede defeat easily. Her silence was more terrifying than her usual sharp words. As Alessandro and Giulia settled at nonno Enzo's table, engaging him in conversation, the air in the room grew thick with unspoken tension. The other guests, unsure how to proceed, began to syllable awkwardly, their whispers no more frantic. Mi motor, finally regaining her voice, the feet was strained, announced, dinner is served. The voice felt hollow, stripped of their usual authority. He watched her, a predator observing his prey. The small act of rebellion, the public defiance of her unspoken rules, had ignited something within me. This was no longer just about nonno Enzo's comfort, or my brother's wedding. This was a battle for respect, for dignity, for a voice in a family that had tried to silence me. And Alessandro's unexpected arrival, his immediate alignment with nonno Enzo, had given me an unexpected ally. The speeches were moving, and the game had just gotten infinitely more interesting. The distant hum of the jury heralded not just an arrival, but a declaration of war. Andy, Enzo, was ready to fight. The air in the villa, already thick with unspoken resentments, now crackled with a different kind of energy. Alessandro's arrival, heralded by the distant hum of his private jet, had been an earthquake, shifting the very foundation of my motor's carefully constructed world. His presence, his immediate, unwavering support for nonno Enzo, felt like a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge to Isabella's absolute authority. He watched her face a mask of practiced composure, but a flicker in her eyes betrayed the tremor beneath. She had not anticipated this. She had not anticipated asterisco e asterisco. Alessandro, she purred, her voice dripping with a sweetness that could mig. What a surprise. We weren't expecting Y until the wedding itself. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which darted between Alessandro, nonno Enzo, and then, almost imperceptibly, to me. She was assessing, calculating, trying to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond her grasp. Alessandro, however, was not easily swayed. He moved with a quiet power, a man accustomed to commanding respect. His gaze swept over the small, ignominious stable where nonno Enzo had been relegated, then settled on my mother, a chilling politeness in his tone. Isabella, it seems there has been a misunderstanding. Mi dir nonno Enzo, the guest of honor, placedere. His voice remained level, but the unspoken accusation hung in the air, sharper than any shouted word. I believed there must be amore. Fitting arrangement. A gasp rippled through the room. My mother, Isabella, rarely challenged, certainly not in front of the entire family. Her face, usually so composed, tightened almost imperceptibly. Alessandro, darling, was merely a temporary spot. The main tables are quite full. YOC, and nonno Enzo enjoys a quieter corner. The lie was transparent, flimsy as tissue paper. The quieter corner was based at the overflowing bin, the smell of wilting flowers and stale food a testament to her disdain. Alessandro says, however, held an unwavering intensity. Indeed, funny, nonno Enzo always preferred the art of the celebration, surrounded by family. Perhaps a larger table could be found. Or perhaps, he paused, his gaze sweeping across the other guests, al no acutely aware of the drama unfolding, we could rearrange. After all, what is a wedding without the patriarchate is had? The implication was clear. Either nonno Enzo received the respect he deserved, or the wedding, and Alice's meticulously planned grandeur, would be tainted. Isabella's jaw clenched. She was cornered, and the venom in her eyes was palpable, directed not just at Alessandro, but at me, for daring to stand by nonno Enzo, for daring to be an accomplice in this public humiliation. Of course, Alessandro, she conceded, her voice strained. Whatever I wish. The words were a surrender, but her tone promised retribution. She then turned to Marco, her face softening into a saccharine smile. Marco, darling, how di Greca oasis your uncle in finding amore suitable place for nonno Enzo? Marco, ever the dutiful son, not dead, but he says, when they met Mine, held a flicker of something he couldn't equate decipher, not resentment, not anger, but perhaps a grudging respect, or even, dare I say, a hint of fear. He knew, as he did, that Alessandro was not to be trifled with. As nonno Enzo was escorted to a place of honor at the main table, a triumphant glint in his eyes, he felt a surge of exhilaration. This was it, the first blow had been struck. The battle lines were drawn. But the victory, however sweet, was short-lived. Later that evening, after the dinner, as the guests mingled and the music played, he found myself cornered by my mother. She had a way of isolating Y, of making Y, feel utterly alone even in a crowded room. Her voice was low, deceptively calm, but her eyes were sharp of each. So, Enzo, she began, her tone latched with a mocking sweetness. Y think you're clever, don't Y. Bringing Alessandro into this. Undermining me in front of everyone. He met her gaze, refusing to back down. Nonno Enzo deserved better, mother. Y know that. Her smile vanished. He deserved exactly what he gave him. A son old man, a relic. This family needs to move forward, not cling to the past. Her voice were a direct assault on everything nonno Enzo represented. Everything he dear. Is the foundation of this family, he retorted, my voice trembling slightly with suppressed anger. He built everything we have. And moved with a swiftness that took me by surprise. A sharp, Stinging blow across my cheek, the sound, tough my flat beat the music, echoed in my ears. Mia snapped back. And the taste of blood filled me mouth. The shock of it, the shirodacity, left me momentarily stunned. Don't I greca ou da respecto me that way, Enzo, she said, her voice low, furious whisper. I greca ou are nothing without me. I greca ou are a child, a foolish, ungrateful child. And if I greca ou think Alessandro will protect I greca ou from me, I greca ou are sorely mistaken. Eres blazed with a cold fairy had rarely seen directed so openly at me. This is me house, me family, me rules. And I greca ou will learn to respect them, or I greca ou will regret. She spun on her heel, melting back into the crowd, leaving me reeling, the impri. And the tear were burning on my cheek. The physical pain was nothing compared to the searing humiliation, the raw sense of betrayal. This wasn't just Abu nonno Enzo anymore. It was Abu her absolute control, her ruthless determination to crush onione udared to death air. It touched me stinging cheek, me fingers coming away faintly stained with blood. The music, the laughter, the joyous sounds of the pre-wedding celebration, all seemed to mock me. My mother's slap was not just a physical assault. It was a declaration of war, a brutal reminder of her power. But it was also a catalyst. The resentment that had simmered within me for so long, the quiet bitterness, now ignited into a burning obsession. I looked across the crowded room, my eyes finding nonno Enzo logging with Alessandro, seemingly oblivious to the silent battle that had just transpired. Then I saw Marco, his guts briefly catching mine, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before he turned away. The chessboard was still being set, but the pieces were moving with a new, terrifying speed. The slap pass led me resolve. I vowed not let her win. I vowed not let her destroy everything nonno Enzo held dear, everything I believed in. The game had just turned deadly. The sting of my mother, sent lingered, a physical manifestation of the invisible chains she'd always tried to bind me with. That pain, tough, was quickly overshadowed by a cold, clear resolve. The game had indeed turned deadly, and he was done playing by rules. Nonno Enzo, oblivious to the silent war raging around him, had settled into his ignominious seat, his keen eye scanning the room, perhaps searching for a familiar face, a sign of welcome beyond my own strained smile. I couldn't let him remain there, a discarded relic in a room full of carefully curated pretense. My mind rushed, every past slide, every cutting remark, every moment of feeling diminished by my mother's cold indifference, coalescing into a singular, burning purpose. This wasn't just Abu nonno Enzo. It was Abu reclaiming a piece of myself, a piece she'd systematically tried to erase. The air in the villa, thick with the scent of wilting roses and stale food, suddenly felt charged with possibility. I needed a plan, something bold, something undeniable. Something that would expose the true nature of the family facade my mother so meticulously maintained. I excused myself from the table, muttering something about needing fresh air. My guts briefly locking with Marco's again. This time, there was a flicker of understanding, a shared history of navigating our mother's intricate web of manipulation. It didn't intervene, but it didn't condemn me either. That teeny, almost imperceptible nod from him was alte affermazioni needed. I walked through the villa, past the opulent drawing rooms, the marble floors reflecting the dimmed chandeliers, my steps purposeful. My destination, the small, rarely used study at the back of the house, where nonno Enzo always kept his worn leather satchel. He was a creature of habit, and he knew exactly what he was looking for. Inside, nestled beneath a stack of old letters and a well-loved copy of Dante, was a small, unassuming black book. It wasn't a diary, not in the traditional sense, but a ledger. Nonno Enzo, a man of meticulous habits, had always kept detailed records of everything, from olive harvest to family finance. My fingers trembled as he pulled it out, The letter soft and warm from years of use. This wasn't just any ledger. It was the financial backbone of the family olive oil business. One my father had built, the one my mother had seized control of after his death. Every transaction, every major investment, every distribution of profits was recorded here, in nonno and precise, elegant handwriting. He knew, instinctively, that this book held the key. My mother, in her ruthless efficiency, had systematically cut nonno Enzo out of the business, claiming he was too frail to manage it. But this book would tell a different story. Back in the main dining room, the pre-dinner chatter had reacted crescendo. My mother, radiant in a silk gown, held court, her laughter tinkling like each in a glass. She glanced at me as he entered, a dismissive flick of her wrist, as if he were an inconvenient flea. He ignored her, me focused entirely on nonno Enzo. He was trying to engage a distant cousin in conversation, but his voice was soft, easily drowned out by the boisterous crowd. The indignity of his position, the deliberate isolation, fueled me resolve. He approached nonno Enzo stable, the black ledger clutched tightly in my hand. He looked up, he says with an slightly as he saw the book. A silent question passed between us. He offered him a small, reassuring smile. Nonno, he sighed. My voice clear and steady. He found something Eureka who might be interested in. My mother, her ears seemingly attuned to any deviation from her carefully orchestrated evening, paused mid-sentence. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed on the black book. A flicker of funese, a momentary crack in her perfect facade, crossed her face. The air in the room, already thick with tension, suddenly became suffocating. He placed the ledger gently on the small table in front of nonno Enzo, opening it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. It was a summary of the past 5 years' profits, and more importantly, the distribution of those profits. My mother had always claimed the business was barely breaking even, that nonno Enzo's shares were being reinvested to keep it afloat. The numbers in the ledger told a different story entirely. A story of substantial profits, and a systematic diversion of funds away from nonno Enzo's rightful inheritance, directly into shell corporations registered under my mother's maiden name. A gasp replied through the room. Not from nonno Enzo, who merely looked at the figures with a quiet, heartbreaking understanding, but from the other relatives who had started together, drawn by the sudden shift in atmosphere. My mother's face, usually so composed, contorted into a mask of pure fury. Her eyes, usually cold, now burned with a dangerous fear. What is the meaning of this? Sofia? She said, her voice low but latched with venom. Are Greca out trying to ruin Marco's wedding? I met her gazze. My own eyes unblinking. No, mama, he replied, my voice steady. I am simply trying to ensure that nonno Enzo receives what is rightful his. What Papa wanted for him, the mention of Papa, a man my mother rarely spoke of, struck a nerve. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Every Greca in the room was sonus. The game had indeed turned deadly, and the first shot had been fired. My mother's perfect world was beginning to unravel on a meticulously recorded entry at that time. The true battle had just begun. The air in the villa crackled, not just with the summer but with a tension that was palpable, a silent scream echoing through the ancient stone walls. My mother, Isabella, stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling like an old fresco. The mention of Papa, a mantia, the meticulously erased from her family narrative, had struck a raw nerve. Every Greca in the room, from the distant cousins to the bewildered caterers, was fixed on us. The game, as he had predicted, had turned deadly, and the first shot had been fired. Her perfect world, a meticulously curated illusion of control and elegance, was beginning to unravel on a meticulously recorded entry at a time. The true battle had just begun. I watched her, a strange mix of triumph and sorrow swirling within me. This wasn't just a pure revenge. It was a pure trap. A pure claiming the narrative she stolen from us, from Papa, from nonno Enzo, and from me. He had spent countless nights poring over those journals, piecing together the fragments of a life she'd tried to bury. Each entry was a tiny shard of glass, reflecting a painful truth, and now, he was ready to shatter her mirror. O think o can just erase history. Mama? My voice, usually soft, was lashed with an unfamiliar steel. O think because o rewrote the past. It ceased to exist. He pulled a worn literary, bound journal from my bag, its pages yellowed with age. The ink faded but still legible. This, he declared, holding it aloft for everyone to see, is Papa's journal. It was. He strut. A gasp rippled through the room. Nonno Enzo, who had been watching me with an intensity that spoke volumes, slowly nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the storm he was unleashing. My mother's face contorted, a mask of fury replacing her usual cool indifference. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched, as if to snatch the journal to silence the echoes of a past she desperately wanted to keep buried. But he was quicker, stepping back, keeping the fragile pages out of her reach. Before Papa died, he continued, my voice gaining strength. It documented everything. Every betrayal. Every lie. Every penny o siphoned away from the family business, from nonno Enzo's legacy, to fund your investments in those shady offshore accounts. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. The murmurs grew louder, turning into a cacophony of whispers and shocked exclamations. My mother says, usually so calculating, darted around the room, searching for an escape, a way to regain control. But there was none. O tried to paint him as a failed businessman, a spendthrift, a man who drove our family to the brink of ruin, he pressed on, my guts unwavering. But the truth, Mama, is that he was trying to save it. He was trying to protect nonno Enzo's inheritance, the very foundation of our family's wealth, from your insatiable greed. He opened the journal to a marked page, its delicate paper rustling in the sudden silence. He announced, my finger tracing a line of elegant script, e detest the exact amounts, the dates, the names of the shell corporations o used. He recorded the conversations, the threats o made, the way o manipulated him when he tried to expose o. The color drained from my mother's face, leaving it ashen. Her composure, once impenetrable, had completely shattered. She stumbled backward, bumping into a waiter who quickly steadied her. Her perfect world was not just unraveling, it was imploding. The guest, initially shocked, now looked at her with a mixture of disgust and pity. Marco, my brother, stood beside his face a mask of utter bewilderment, his wedding day turning into a public spectacle of our family's darkest secrets. And then, he sighed, my voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying clearly through the stunned silence. There is the matter of Papa's will. This was the final, devastating blow. O told everyone he had intestate, leaving nothing but debts. But Papa was a meticulous man. He had a will. A very specific one. And it wasn't in your favor. He reached into another pocket, pulling out a sealed envelope, crisp and official. This, he stated, holding it up, is a copy of that will, notarized and witnessed. It leaves everything, not to O, but to nonno Enzo, and then, upon his passing, directly to me. The room erupted. A collective gasp followed by a torrent of exclamations. Nonno Enzo says, which had been fixed on me with a quick understanding, no widened in disbelief, then filled with a profound sadness. He knew, as he did, the depth of her deception, the extent of her cruelty. My mother let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated defect. She looked at me, Her eyes blazing with a thread so intense it almost physically recoiled. Y-O. Y-O little snake, she said, her voice cracking. You've been planning this, haven't Y-O? All these years, pretending to be the dutiful daughter, while plotting my ruin. I was planning to survive. Mama, I countered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I was planning to protect what was left of our family, and to honor Papa's memory. Something Y-O clearly never intended to do. The raw emotion, the years of resentment, the burning desire for justice, finally erupted. It wasn't a scream, but a quiet, powerful declaration that resonated through the grand villa. The climax was here, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating revelation of truth. The battle had been fought, and the silence that followed was the sound of her world collapsing. The silence that followed my declaration was not empty, but heavy, pregnant with the weight of years of unspoken truths. Isabella stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. Her perfectly coiffed hair seemed to drop. Her designer dress suddenly looked ill-fitting. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale, almost ghostly. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, only a faint, choked sound. It was the sound of a queen dethroned, her kingdom collapsing around her. Nonno Enzo, my steadfast anchor, rose slowly from his seat, his gaze fixed on Isabella. There was no anger in his eyes, only a profound sadness, a deep disappointment that cut far deeper than any sharp word could. He walked towards her, his steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing the finality of the moment. He reached her, not to confront, but to simply stand, his silent presence a testament to the moral authority she so carelessly squandered. He didn't need to speak. His very being radiated the truth of her transgressions. Then, a new sound cut through the stunned silence, the unmistakable thrum of a helicopter, growing louder, closer. It wasn't the distant hum of a commercial flight, but the powerful, resonant beat of a private jet, descending rapidly. Alice turned towards the large glass doors of the villa, a collective gasp rippling through the room as a sleek, black helicopter materialized against the twilight sky, its landing lights piercing the gathering dusk. It settled gracefully on the manicured lawn, just beyond the olive trees, its rotors slowly winding down. A figure emerged from the helicopter, tall and imposing, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He moved with an air of undeniable authority, his presence commanding immediate attention. It was Alessandro Rossi, the CEO of the Rossi Group, a name synonymous with power and wealth across Italy. E W. As a man who moved mountains, a man whose word was law in the financial world. But more importantly, he was a man nonno Enzo had mentored decades ago. A man who owed my grandfather a debt of gratitude that transcended mere business. Alessandro strode into the villa, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on nonno Enzo. A warm smile, genuine and respectful, spread across his face. He walked directly to my grandfather, bypassing everyone else, and embraced him, a gesture of deep reverence. Nonno Enzo, he sighed, his voice a low rumble. I came as soon as he had. Your flight was delayed, and I knew Y wouldn't miss Marco's wedding for anything. He then turned, his gaze sweeping over the assembled family, finally settling on Isabella, his expression hardening imperceptibly. Signora Bellini, Alessandro sighed, his voice now devoid of warmth. I understand there have been some misunderstandings regarding nonno Enzo's comfort and respect here. His eyes flickered toward the discarded seating arrangement, then to the isolated table near the kitchen. Such treatment is unacceptable. Nonno Enzo is not just a guest. He is a pillar of this family, a man whose wisdom and integrity are beyond reproach. The implicit threat in his tone was clear. Disrespect nonno Enzo, and Y disrespect the Rossi Group. Isabella, who had always prided herself on her connections, ability to navigate the treacherous waters of I society, was utterly undone. Alessandro Rossi was a force she could not control, a reputation she could not tarnish. Face, already pale, no flushed with a deep, mortified dread. Carefully constructed world, built on appearance and manipulation, was crumbling, exposed for all to see. The power she wielded through social standing and inherited wealth was not against the unassailable authority of genuine respect and influence. Nonno Enzo, seeing her defeat, placed a gentle hand on Alessandro's arm, a silent signal to temper his words. E then turned to Isabella, his voice soft yet firm. Isabella, he began, his tone latched with a profound sadness. I Greca have forgotten what truly matters. Family is not about control or appearance. It is about love, respect, and honor. I Greca have dishonored yourself, and in doing so, I Greca have dishonored us all. His voice, delivered without anger, were far more devastating than any shout. They were the judgment of the patriarch, the final verdict. Isabella recoiled as if struck, her shoulders slumping, the fight had left her. She looked utterly broken, her eyes darting around the room, meeting no one's guts. The silence that followed was different now. It was the silence of a truth universally acknowledged. Marco, my brother, finally stepped forward, his face itched with a mixture of shame and anger. He looked at Isabella, then at me, then at nonno Enzo. Mother, he sighed, his voice strained. What have Greca done? His disappointment was palpable, ivy white in the air. He had always been blind to her manipulations, but now, patched with the undeniable evidence, his eyes were finally open. The wedding, of course, went on. But the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Isabella, her spirit crushed, remained largely silent, her usual effervescence replaced by a hollow pallor. Her attempts at controlling the narrative, at reclaiming her position, were met with polite but firm distance from the other guests, especially those connected to Alessandro Rossi. The whispers followed her, not of admiration, but of quiet condemnation. Her social standing, once unassailable, had taken a devastating blow. For me, the victory was bittersweet. There was no joy in Isabella's humiliation, only a quiet sense of justice. The resentment that had festered within me for so long began to recede, replaced by a weary pace. Nonno Enzo, my wise and unwavering protector, had ensured that the truth prevailed. He had not sought revenge, but rather, he had simply allowed the natural consequence of Isabella's actions to unfold, aided by the unexpected yet timely arrival of Alessandro. In the days that followed, the family dynamic began to sadly shift. Marco, shaken by the events, sought me out, apologizing for his blindness, for not seeing what he had endured. Our bond, once strained, slowly began to mend. Nonno Enzo stayed for several weeks after the wedding, his presence a comforting balm, helping to heal the lingering wounds. He taught me that true strength lies not in inflicting pain, but in standing for what is right, even when it's difficult. The villa, once a battleground, slowly began to feel like home again, its unbacked walls once more holding the promise of pace. The bitter taste of resentment had faded, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a truth revealed and a family, however imperfectly, beginning to heal. The cost had been high, but the lessons learned, the bonds reaffirmed were invaluable. He had fought for me dignity, and with nonno Enzo's quiet straight he had finally found my voice. Il ruggito del jet privato non era solo un suono. Era un terremoto che scuoteva le fondamenta della nostra finta perfezione. Mia madre, con la sua maschera di superiorità, impallidì. La mano che un attimo prima mi aveva schiaffeggiato ora tremava visibilmente. Quella villa, un tempo simbolo del suo potere, sembrava improvvisamente rimpicciolirsi sotto l'ombra imponente dell'aereo. Poi, il nonno scese dalla scaletta, non con la sua solita andatura lenta, ma con una determinazione che non gli avevo mai visto. Accanto a lui, un uomo d'affari impeccabile, il suo avvocato. L'aria si fece gelida, un silenzio assordante calò sulla folla attonita. Il nonno si avvicinò, i suoi occhi, un tempo pieni di dolcezza, ora bruciavano di una fiamma fredda. Non guardò mia madre. I suoi occhi erano fissi su mio fratello, il promesso sposo. Michele, disse la sua voce, roca ma ferma, questo matrimonio non avrà luogo. Mia madre trovò finalmente la voce, un sibilo isterico. Papà, sei impazzito? Stai rovinando tutto. Il nonno si voltò lentamente verso di lei, e in quello sguardo c'era tutta la delusione di una vita. Ho visto abbastanza, Maria. Ho visto come hai trattato Enzo, come hai umiliato la nostra famiglia. E ho visto le prove. L'avvocato si fece avanti, una cartella sottile in mano. Signora Rossi, iniziò, la sua voce calma ma tagliente come una lama, abbiamo scoperto che il signor Bianchi non è chi dice di essere. La sua azienda è sull'orlo del fallimento, i suoi conti sono bloccati e il suo portafoglio è un castello di carte. Questo matrimonio era un tentativo disperato di accedere ai fondi della famiglia Rossi per salvare la sua bancarotta. Le parole colpirono come macigni. Il volto di Bianchi si sbiancò. La sua arroganza crollò come un edificio fatiscente. Mia madre barcollò. Le sue labbra si muovevano ma nessun suono usciva. Il nonno non aveva ancora finito. Maria, continuò, la sua voce ora un sussurro carico di dolore. Ho sempre cercato di credere in te, nonostante tutto. Ma la tua crudeltà verso Enzo, il tuo disprezzo per le nostre radici, la tua avidità, ha superato ogni limite. Ho modificato il mio testamento. La villa, i terreni, la maggior parte del patrimonio andrà a Enzo. Lui ha dimostrato lealtà, rispetto e un cuore puro. Tu e Michele riceverete solo una quota minima, sufficiente per vivere, ma non per sperperare. Un gemito soffocato uscì dalla gola di mia madre. Michele, furioso, si scagliò contro Bianchi, urlando accuse e imprecazioni. La scena era un caos, un dramma greco che si svolgeva sotto gli occhi di tutti. Io stavo lì, in piedi, sentendo il peso di anni di ingiustizie sollevarsi dalle mie spalle. Non era trionfo, non era vendetta pura. Era una strana mescolanza di sollievo e tristezza. La giustizia era arrivata, ma il prezzo era la distruzione di ciò che restava della mia famiglia. Il nonno mi si avvicinò, i suoi occhi finalmente si addolcirono. Mi prese la mano. Enzo, disse, la sua voce tremante, mi dispiace di non aver agito prima. Non sapevo quanto in profondità fossero arrivati. Ma ora sei libero. Costruisci la tua vita, la tua famiglia, con amore e onore. Sii l'uomo che io so che puoi essere. Nei giorni successivi, la villa divenne un cantiere di emozioni. Mia madre e Michele si rinchiusero, le loro urla risuonavano tra le pareti. Bianchi scomparve, inghiottito dal suo stesso inganno. Io, invece, iniziai a respirare. Il nonno rimase con me per un po', condividendo storie, saggezza e un amore incondizionato che non avevo mai pienamente compreso. La villa, un tempo simbolo di oppressione, divenne un santuario. La trasformai, con l'aiuto di amici fidati e del nonno, in un centro culturale, un luogo dove l'arte, la musica e la storia italiana potevano fiorire. Non era più la villa di mia madre. Era la villa della comunità, un luogo di celebrazione e di connessione. Mesi dopo, il nonno si spense serenamente nel suo sonno, lasciandomi non solo un'eredità materiale, ma anche una spirituale. La sua ultima lezione fu la più preziosa. La vera ricchezza non risiede nel denaro o nel potere, ma nell'integrità, nell'amore e nella capacità di perdonare. Ho imparato che la vendetta, sebbene soddisfacente nel momento, lascia un retrogusto amaro. La vera giustizia non è distruggere gli altri, ma ricostruire se stessi. Ho perdonato mia madre e Michele, non per loro, ma per me stesso, per liberare il mio cuore dal veleno del risentimento. La strada è stata lunga e dolorosa, ma alla fine ho trovato la mia pace. E nella villa che una volta era una prigione, ho finalmente trovato la mia casa.